In October 1692, a woman was named a witch. That was not unusual. Dozens had been named that year in Salem, Massachusetts. What was unusual was who she was. Her name was Mary Phipps. Her husband, Sir William Phipps, was the royal governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, the same man who had created the court doing the naming. Within weeks of her accusation, that court was dissolved, permanently. 19 people had already hanged. 5 more had died in custody. The court that killed them did not conclude. It simply stopped. Welcome to the Grim Archive. Tonight's file, the Salem Witch Trials. By the spring of 1692, Salem Village, Massachusetts was a community already fracturing. Land disputes, a bitter ministerial conflict, the psychological weight of frontier warfare with the Wabanaki Confederacy to the north. When several young girls began exhibiting convulsions and making accusations, the colony's legal and religious infrastructure moved swiftly. A special court was convened in June, the Court of Oyer and Terminer. Its mandate was to hear and determine. It would do both, with fatal efficiency, across a single summer. The court was the idea of Governor Phipps, newly arrived from England with a royal charter and no time to spare. He appointed Lieutenant Governor William Stoughton as chief judge. Stoughton was not a lawyer. He was a minister, a Harvard man, deeply certain of his own judgment. The court he ran did not operate like a modern criminal proceeding. It admitted spectral evidence, testimony that the accused had appeared to a witness in a dream or vision. Under that standard, the only defense was a denial, and a denial, in that room, rarely worked. Standing behind the court, publicly, on record, was Cotton Mather. He was 30 years old, the son of Harvard's president, and the most influential minister in Boston. In June 1692, Mather attended the execution of Bridget Bishop, the first person hanged. He did not intervene. He observed. Later that summer, he published Wonders of the Invisible World, a detailed defense of the court's procedures and a narrative of several trials. The book was endorsed by the governor. It was read across the colony. It told the public the court was doing God's necessary work. Between June and September 1692, the Court of Oyer and Terminer executed 19 people by hanging on Proctor's Ledge, a rocky outcrop at the edge of Salem. One man, Giles Corey, was pressed to death under stones when he refused to enter a plea. At least 5 others died in the prison at Ipswich. The accusations did not slow. They widened. By autumn, more than 200 people were named. The accused included a 4-year-old child. They included a former Salem village minister, and eventually, they would include the governor's own wife. Governor Phipps had been at sea, managing the war on the northern frontier, while the court he created operated in his absence. When he returned to Boston in October, the situation had changed. The accusations had climbed the social ladder until they reached people the court could not conveniently hang. The exact date Mary Phipps was named is not recorded in surviving documents. That detail, historians note, may have been deliberately omitted from the official record. What is recorded is what happened next. On October 29, 1692, Phipps dissolved the Court of Oyer and Terminer by executive order. No trial was ever completed under it again. Dissolving a court does not erase its record. Over 200 people remained imprisoned, awaiting trials that would now never come under the old rules. A new court, the Superior Court of Judicature, was convened in January 1693. But it needed a new legal standard. Someone had to provide the argument that would make the old convictions untenable without openly condemning the men who had issued them. That task fell, quietly, to Cotton Mather and his father, Increase Mather, the very men whose public credibility had helped sustain the original court through its deadliest months. In October 1692, the same month the court was dissolved, Increase Mather had delivered a sermon that became a printed treatise, Cases of Conscience Concerning Evil Spirits. Its argument was precise. Spectral evidence, he wrote, was inherently unreliable. The devil could assume the shape of an innocent person. Therefore, no conviction based on spectral testimony could be considered sound. The logic was unassailable. It was also, quietly, a demolition of every conviction the court had already issued. Increase Mather had watched those convictions proceed for months. He had not published this argument in June. Cotton Mather never publicly retracted wonders of the invisible world. He never acknowledged in any surviving document that his endorsement of the court's methods had contributed to 19 executions. When the new legal framework rendered spectral evidence inadmissible, he did not note the contradiction. He moved forward. In the years that followed, he continued to write about witchcraft, framing the Salem episode increasingly as a cautionary tale about the dangers of the devil's deceptions, without specifying who, precisely, had been deceived. The historical record preserves his silence on that point with remarkable completeness. By May 1693, Governor Phipps had issued a general pardon for all remaining accused persons still in custody. The legal machinery of the Salem trials was fully dismantled. But the colony did not move immediately toward accountability. It moved toward silence. The official court records were sealed. Several key documents from the Oyer and Terminer proceedings were never transferred to the new court archive. Whether that was bureaucratic failure or deliberate management of the paper trail is a question historians still debate. What survived was enough. What did not survive may have been more useful still. In 1697, the Massachusetts General Court declared a day of fasting and repentance for the trials. Samuel Sewell, one of the original Oyer and Terminer judges, stood before his congregation in Boston's South Church and read a public statement of personal guilt. He took full responsibility. He asked forgiveness. He was the only judge who did. William Stoughton, who had presided over every conviction, never apologized. He continued to serve in colonial government. He became acting governor of Massachusetts in 1694. The colony, it seemed, was more comfortable with repentance from those who acknowledged error than with accountability from those who never would. In 1957, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts formally apologized for the Salem witch trials. In 2001, the last 5 names still missing from prior exonerations were officially cleared. The exonerations came 3 centuries late. The 19 who hanged at Proctor's Ledge were acknowledged as innocent by the government whose predecessor had killed them. Cotton Mather's Wonders of the Invisible World is still in print. Increase Mather's Cases of Conscience is studied in law schools. Neither text names the other as its contradiction. The archive holds both. The archive is always open. The next file is already waiting.